Hello, feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Welcome to Dirt Dispatch number 30. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So I follow several nature social media pages. No big surprise there, right? But I've noticed that a frequently asked question on many of those pages involves birds nesting in what is, in a human's assessment, a quote-unquote bad spot. In Virginia, Carolina wrens were notorious for nesting in strange places. We had one nest in our potted plant that was right outside the front door, and another under the cover of our 50-gallon propane tank. I've seen posts about these little birds nesting in wreaths left on the front door from Christmas, in the pocket of a jacket that was left hanging in a shed, and even under the hood of a car that was used daily. And to that person's credit, they offered to forgo the use of their car until the chicks fledged. I would not have been able to be so accommodating. I've seen posts about killdeer, which are ground nesting birds, nesting in gravel driveways or parking areas. Ducks and geese nesting near busy sidewalks or paths. Here at the high school where my kids go to school, there's a Canada goose that built a nest on a narrow strip of grass between the student parking lot and the main driveway into the school, which, for the record, is a pretty good distance from the nearest water. Thankfully, the school is almost out for the year, so in fact today is the last day of school, so traffic in and out of the school parking lot will be significantly less after today. And also thankfully, they've avoided mowing anywhere near the nest. Now, regardless of your attitude towards geese, for the record, and this is true for most birds here in the United States at least, removing or intentionally disturbing a nest after there are eggs in it is a violation of federal law. So it's good to know that the school district is complying with the Federal Migratory Bird Act. Here at Dispatches HQ, we have a Eurasian collared dove that's been trying to nest on top of a pillar on our front porch. Now, much to my amusement, the nest, and I use that term loosely, doves aren't known for their nest building prowess, has been constructed on top of bird spikes that were there to prevent birds from nesting in that spot. Please note that we did not put the spikes there. We don't own this house. Now, in most cases, the expert advice for a bird nesting in a, quote, bad spot, unquote, is to leave them alone. Protect them from disturbance if you need to by blocking off the area, but otherwise just leave them be. And not just because it's against the law to disturb the nest, but to be clear, you don't have to go so far as to surrender your vehicle to the birds. But mainly because most of the time, the bird has chosen that spot for a reason. That reason may not be obvious to you or me, but it makes sense to the bird. The high school goose may have chosen that spot because there are fewer predators like coyotes or raccoons to worry about. The dove may have chosen that spot because of the roof that provides shelter from both the weather and birds of prey. Carolina wrens, well, sometimes I think they're just trying to one-up each other on how ridiculous or inconvenient a place they can find to nest. But seriously, the places they choose are often hidden and therefore also safer from predators and sheltered from weather. Is nature infallible? Well, no, not at all. Porcupines and even squirrels fall out of trees. Beavers have been killed by the trees they're cutting down. Deer fall through the ice in winter. Wild animals can make mistakes, errors in judgment, or just plain stumble like the rest of us. And that means birds sometimes choose bad places to nest. The collared dove on our porch has already had one egg fall out of the nest, although that may have had more to do with nest quality than site selection. And don't feel too bad for the dove. First of all, collared doves are an invasive species here in North America. And second of all, collared doves breed throughout the year as long as food is abundant. It's part of what makes them successful as an invasive species. So she will no doubt lay more eggs, probably in a different nest though, since she seems to have abandoned this one already. Because many bird species learn to choose good nesting spots through some degree of trial and error. Birds might return to the same nesting spot, even reusing the same nest year after year if they were successful in raising a brood there. And if they were unsuccessful, either because of predators, because eggs fall out of the nest, or for some other reason, they'll usually find a different spot and try again. And many of the birds here around Dispatches HQ have already hatched their first brood of the season. While I've yet to see any pelican chicks, and while the high school goose seems to have gotten a late start, I have seen some fluffy goslings out and about, along with, just recently, some juvenile magpies. Magpies have long tails. Juvenile magpies look exactly like adults, except they have short tails. And when you're used to seeing magpies with those long tail feathers, the ones with short tails tend to stand out. Okay, enough about birds. There's something else that fascinates me a little, and I want to tell you about it, and that's seasonal wetlands. Near Dispatches HQ, we have several permanent water sources. I've mentioned the small lakes on several occasions. It's where my pelicans hang out. And there's also a creek that flows through the area, which creates some permanent marshy wetland areas. We also have some areas that are seasonal wetlands. They've been mostly dry until recently when we finally got a significant amount of rain. And they'll probably stay wet for a few months and dry up again towards the end of summer. Now, back near the start of April, around one of the permanent wetlands, I noted the singing of boreal chorus frogs, which are some of the first amphibians to emerge when the weather starts to warm up. But interestingly, the timing of the frogs singing tends to correlate with the water level of their home body of water. So once the seasonal wetlands were full again, the frogs appeared like magic. Now I say appeared, but what I really mean is suddenly they were singing in these seasonally wet areas where they weren't singing before. Seeing a boreal chorus frog is rare, but you can hear them from quite a distance. Where they had been hiding until these areas were wet again, I don't know. And one of the spots where I can hear them singing now is not very big. It's maybe 8 feet long and 5 feet wide. It's really not much more than a puddle, but it's apparently enough to attract frogs. And experience tells me that this area will stay wet now for several months. Well, feral friends, that's all I have to report this week. If you'd like to support the podcast, consider becoming a patron. Check out all the details at patreon.com/dispatchesfromtheforest. Todd Sauls highly recommends it. You can also donate using the Cash App and the hashtag ForestNerd, or using PayPal and my email address, dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. Of course, you can also use that email address to send me an email with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Check out the merch store at cafepress.com/shop/dispatchesfromtheforest. Click on products and get yourself some awesome Dispatches from the Forest merch. Finally, you can follow Dispatches from the Forest on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.